The sandstorm rose without warning, choking the narrow gorge that cut through the dark cliffs of Tanverin Prime. The human scout, Captain Eric Danner, ducked low behind a fallen rock, visor smeared with dust. His orders had been simple: observe, report, avoid contact. But the sound he heard wasn't wind or rockfall. It was screaming. He grabbed his rifle and moved uphill, boots kicking up gravel. Below, shadows flickered, 6 figures in black armor, blades drawn, circling something white and small. It wasn't a soldier. It was a girl. No, an alien female, dressed in royal silks, blood on her shoulder, cornered against the rock face. She looked young, terrified, and very much about to die. Eric didn't wait. He slid down the slope, fired twice. One assassin dropped. The others turned, snarling in some unknown tongue. Eric dove into the middle of them like a madman. He didn't know who she was, but they were going to kill her. And he couldn't let that happen. The fight was ugly. Knives scraped armor. One blade slashed across his side. Another assassin kicked him back. But Eric rose again, using the butt of his rifle to crush one helmet, then tackled the last 2 with sheer force. He didn't feel the wounds until it was over. Blood was everywhere, and not all of it was theirs. The girl stared at him, wide-eyed. Her voice was soft, shaking. She asked something in a language he didn't know. Then she saw the cut on his side and pressed her hand to it. Her hand glowed faintly blue. Warmth spread through Eric's ribs. Pain faded. He blinked at her. That's when he noticed the guards arriving, dozens of them, in gleaming silver armor, weapons ready. But they didn't attack him. They dropped to their knees, weapons lowered, eyes wide with recognition. The girl said something. Sharp in command, the guards moved to collect the bodies. One offered Eric water. Another bowed. Later, they brought him through shining palace gates. Towers spiraled high into the pink sky. It looked like a dream, but Eric felt out of place, dirty, wounded, human. The girl stayed beside him, never letting go of his arm. Servants whispered. Nobles stared. He heard her name at last, Princess. Kayla of the House of Harnix. She was royalty. And he had saved her life. When the king arrived, the room fell silent. A massive figure in ceremonial armor, his eyes burning gold. But when he saw Kayla safe, his face cracked with emotion. He stepped down from his throne, took Eric's hand, and raised it high. The words were translated by a floating I voice. This human saved my daughter. By our blood and honor, we owe him everything. Eric tried to object, but Kayla spoke first. She stood in front of her father, voice steady and proud. She pointed to Eric, then placed her hand over her heart. The king's expression changed. Shock, then thought, then a slow nod. He turned to Eric and said something final. The I translated, then she is yours. If you accept, she will walk beside you until death. Eric didn't know how to answer. It felt too fast, too strange. But Kayla looked at him with hope, not pressure. She took his hand again, not out of duty but something else. Something human. That night, he didn't sleep. Outside, the twin moons lit up the garden below his chamber. He stood by the window, thinking of the battle, her face, her voice. He wasn't a hero, just a soldier who couldn't walk away. But somehow that had changed everything, and now, the galaxy knew his name. Eric woke up to the scent of flowers and the sound of soft music playing in the distance. The air felt different, lighter, warmer, not like the dry winds of Earth or the steel walls of warships. The bed beneath him was too soft, the room too quiet. It took him a moment to remember where he was. He was in the palace of Harnix, on a distant alien world, treated as a hero for something he would have done anyway. He had saved someone. That was it. But in their culture, it meant something more. The door slid open. Kayla stepped inside. Her white dress shimmered, her long black hair braided with tiny jewels. She looked younger now, calmer, like she had slept for the first time in weeks. She smiled when she saw him sitting up. Eric tried to smile back. "You look better," she said in Galactic Standard. Her accent was soft, musical. She sat beside him and handed him a small plate of fruit. He took a bite without thinking. It was sweet, like honey and mint. She watched him eat with a strange look in her eyes. "You risked everything," she said. "Why?" He paused. "Because you needed help." "That's what we do." Kayla tilted her head, confused. "Even for someone not of your kind?" "Especially then," Eric said. They walked together later in the royal gardens. The place was alive with glowing plants, tall trees with silver leaves, and birds that sang in multiple tones. Eric kept his hand on the sidearm hidden under his cloak. Old habits died hard. Kayla noticed but said nothing. They passed children playing with floating spheres and alien elders meditating near blue fountains. Everyone bowed to Kayla. A few bowed to Eric too. It made him uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being looked at like that. She led him to a marble platform overlooking the city. The view was incredible. 1,000 towers reached for the sky. Drones zipped past. Ships hovered in and out of high-altitude lanes. He had never seen such clean, peaceful design. It was like a dream carved from light. Kayla broke the silence. "They will come for me again. My father thinks the danger has passed, but it hasn't. The ones who sent those assassins, they want more than my death. They want the throne." "Then you need protection," Eric said. Kayla turned to him. "I need you." He looked at her, unsure what to say. It wasn't just about fighting anymore. There was something in her voice, something behind those glowing eyes. She wasn't asking as a princess. She was asking as a person. They returned to the throne hall hours later. The king stood beside his war advisors. Holograms of warships floated above the table. Red dots blinked on border systems. It wasn't just a political threat. There was a war coming. One that hadn't started yet, but would soon. Eric stepped forward. He wasn't a diplomat, but he had seen enough conflict to know the signs. The people plotting Kayla's death weren't rebels. They were part of the system, hidden, powerful, silent. "They will strike when you look the other way," Eric said. "You need someone they won't expect. Someone outside your games." The king studied him. "And you are that someone?" "I don't play politics," Eric said. "I protect people." The king nodded slowly. Then he did something unexpected. He walked down the steps of the throne and placed his ceremonial sword into Eric's hands. The blade was curved, inscribed with ancient markings. "With this," he said, "I give you voice. You speak, it will be heard. You act, it will be honored. Protect her, and you protect our future." Kayla stepped beside him again. She didn't smile this time. She looked serious, determined. She held his arm as if she had done it 1,000 times before. Later that night, Eric sat alone in his quarters, the sword across his lap. He stared at it for a long time. He was no prince, no chosen one, just a human, a soldier from a forgotten Earth unit. But now he carried a kingdom's hope and a woman's trust. He looked out the window. The twin moons had shifted. Stars twinkled in patterns he couldn't name. Somewhere in those stars, enemies waited. Assassins, traitors, shadows with plans. But if they came again, they would not find her alone. They would find her standing beside him. Eric stood in the royal training courtyard with a blade in one hand and sweat on his brow. The curved sword he had been given was lighter than what he was used to, but deadlier in the right hands. Alien guards in silver armor watched from a distance, whispering as he moved through the drills again and again. Kayla sat nearby under a shaded pavilion, reading from a glowing tablet. Her eyes followed him more than the text. She had never seen a human fight before. His style was raw, brutal, and Efficient. No fancy spins. Just quick, deliberate movements that ended with the target down. Why do you fight so hard when no one is watching? She asked. Eric didn't stop moving. Because I won't get a second chance when they come. Kayla closed her tablet. You think the assassins will try again soon? I don't think, Eric said, swinging the blade. I know. She stood and walked toward him. Her dress swayed with every step. She picked up a staff from the rack and held it in both hands. Then show me how to defend myself. Eric raised an eyebrow. You want to train with me? I won't always have you beside me, she said. If I must rule, I need to stand on my own. They began slowly. He showed her the basics, how to stand, where to place her hands, how to keep her balance. She was fast, sharper than most soldiers he had trained with before, but she hesitated when things got close. He noticed it right away. You're afraid to strike, he said. She lowered her staff. I don't want to hurt you. Good. Eric said. That means you're not a killer. But if someone comes for you again, they won't hesitate. So you can't either. The next strike she delivered was faster. Stronger. He blocked it, but barely. She grinned at the surprise in his eyes. Guards around them clapped in approval. It wasn't just training anymore. It was something else. Something growing between them that neither had the words to explain. Later, during the evening council, Eric stood behind Kayla as she addressed her father's advisors. Her voice was calm, her shoulders straight. She spoke about reforms, about strengthening outer colonies, and about loyalty. But some faces in the room remained cold. One advisor, a man with silver horns and a crimson robe, stood slowly. His name was Lord Varn. Eric had seen him before, always quiet, always watching. Now he spoke with polite venom. Your Highness, while we all honor your courage, perhaps we are moving too fast. Our traditions cannot change overnight. And this human, what place does he have in the matters of Harnix? The room tensed. Kella's voice didn't shake. He saved my life. He bled for our people. That is more loyalty than some born within. These walls. Eric watched Lord Varn's expression tighten. That was not the answer he wanted. He bowed and sat, but his eyes were cold, dangerous. Eric made a note to watch him closely. After the meeting, Kayla walked with Eric through the silent halls of the palace. She didn't speak for a while. Then she asked, Did I do the right thing? You didn't back down, Eric said. That's what matters. She paused at a window overlooking the city lights. If I lead wrong, people suffer. If I lead right, enemies grow. I never understood how heavy that crown was until now. He stood beside her, not as a soldier, but as someone who had seen burdens like hers before. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Then carry it knowing you're not alone. A sudden sound echoed from the corridor behind them. Footsteps, then a flash. Eric shoved Kayla to the floor and drew his sidearm. The energy bolt missed his head by inches. He fired back, hitting a cloaked figure square in the chest. Guards came running. Another attacker tried to flee but was stopped at the gate. Kayla stood up, shaken but furious. Eric knelt beside the dead assassin and pulled back the hood. The face was familiar. One of the palace staff. Someone they had seen every day. It was someone inside, Kayla whispered. Someone close. Eric looked toward the council chamber in the distance. He didn't say it aloud, but he knew. The enemy wasn't just outside the walls. They were already within them. Kayla turned to him again. Her voice was steady. Teach me everything you know. No more waiting. I want to be ready next time. Eric nodded without hesitation. Because next time, they might not get another warning. Asterisk. The next morning, the palace gates remained closed. No one entered. No one left. The king had ordered a full investigation. Every servant, every guard, even nobles were questioned. Eric stayed at Kayla's side, always watching, always listening. But they found nothing. No messages, no names. The assassin who lived refused to speak, even under pressure. When the king personally questioned him, the man simply smiled and said, "Nothing." Eric stood in the shadows of the chamber, watching the king's hands tighten into fists. Kayla sat quietly, her expression unreadable. She had changed since the last attack. Her eyes no longer trembled. Her voice no longer hesitated. She was preparing for war. That night, Eric trained her harder than before. Sword drills, hand to hand. Defensive moves, how to disable a person without killing. How to read footsteps. How to listen for silence. Kayla pushed herself past exhaustion. She fell, got up, and kept going. She didn't want protection. She wanted to be the one who could protect. Eric respected her more with every move. She wasn't soft. She wasn't a spoiled royal. She had fire. She had purpose. And he saw that purpose growing stronger with each passing hour. During the next council, Kayla addressed the room with sharp words. She didn't ask for help. She demanded loyalty. Some nodded. Some hesitated. And some, like Lord Varn, gave her polite claps without warmth. Later, Eric met quietly with the palace archivist. He asked for access to travel logs, records, guard rotations. The Eye protested at first, but Eric showed the royal seal. Given to him by the king, the Eye obeyed. He reviewed the data for hours. Something strange stood out. One of the servants stationed outside Kayla's chambers had requested sudden leave 2 days before the first attack. The logs marked the leave as granted by royal order, yet the king had signed no such thing. Eric sent a message to palace security. "Find that servant," he said. Alive, but the servant never left the city. He had disappeared the same night, no trace, no body. Just a single room left behind in the lower housing quarters. Perfectly clean and perfectly empty. It was a ghost trail. But Eric followed it anyway. Kayla met with him in the inner gardens the following night. She wore simple robes now, no jewelry. Just cloth and steel beneath. She asked no questions, only listened as Eric laid out what he knew. "There's someone inside the council who forged the royal orders," he said. "Someone high enough to access the system." Kayla's fists clenched. "Varn, maybe," Eric said, "but we need proof. Not guesses." She looked up at the stars. "I don't want to lose anyone else." "You won't," Eric said. "Not if we move first." They began setting traps, quiet ones. Code markers embedded in access logs. Fake orders placed into the system with hidden triggers. Eric coordinated with loyal palace security under his command. Only a few were told. Every word whispered. Every move watched. 4 nights later, the trap worked. An attempt to bypass a fake command triggered a silent alert. The signal led back to a council chamber terminal. A single device left logged in under a false name. They followed it, down tunnels, through abandoned servants' passages, into the oldest part of the palace that even the guards no longer used. Eric held his blade low. Kayla followed behind him, her own short blade drawn. They found the room. 1 man, 1 datapad. He tried to flee, but Eric was faster. The fight was quick, brutal. Eric pinned him against the stone wall. Kayla took the datapad and scanned it. Her face changed. Fury, pain, shock. "It's Varn," she said. "He sent the assassins. He promised them the throne if I died." Eric turned to the man. "You just made a mistake." But before they could drag him to the king, the man bit into something hidden in his mouth. Foam spilled from his lips. He collapsed, dead. Before they could stop him, Kayla stood over the body. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply turned away and walked into the corridor, her blade still in her hand. The next day, she stormed into the council chamber. The king sat beside her. Eric stood behind her. Kayla threw the datapad onto the center table. The room went silent. "Proof," she said. "Varn betrayed us." Gasps filled the air. Some stood in shock. Others looked away. But none could deny the truth, and the kingdom would never be the same again. Varn was gone, but the damage he left behind still lingered. The council chamber remained tense. Trust was broken. Voices rose during meetings. Accusations flew like arrows. The king tried to calm them, but old alliances had begun to crack. Eric stayed quiet, always watching from the edge. His role was changing. He wasn't just Kayla's protector anymore. He was becoming her shield in a world full of daggers. And every dagger was now pointed at her crown. Kayla took full control of her security. She appointed new guards. She removed old ones. She made decisions the old council didn't like. But no one dared challenge her openly. Not after she exposed Varn. Still, threats moved in shadows, messages intercepted. Unknown ships seen near the outer moons. Whispers of rebellion stirred. Across the colonies, Eric and Kayla both knew this wasn't over. One night, Kayla entered the war room holding a scroll. It was ancient, sealed with red wax. The crest on it matched a clan that had disappeared centuries ago. Eric took it and opened it slowly. Inside was a message written in the old script. It promised protection, alliance, and unity. But it demanded something in return, a marriage. Between Kayla and the heir of a noble house now living in exile beyond. The system. She said nothing for a long time. Then she whispered, "My father must have sent this. He is trying to secure peace with tradition." Eric looked at her. "And what do you want?" Kayla raised her eyes. "Not that, but tradition." Was powerful. Rumors spread fast. Courtiers began talking about wedding dates, dresses, political unions. They spoke about Kayla like she wasn't even in the room. Eric hated every second of it. That evening, the king called Eric alone to his private chamber. It was a silent place filled with ancient stone and warm fire. The king didn't wear armor now. Just simple robes and tired eyes. "You've protected my daughter better than I ever could," the king said. "You gave her strength, and she loves you." Eric didn't move. His hands stayed behind his back. His eyes stayed on the king's. "I never asked for this," Eric said. "I didn't come here for power or favor. I came because someone needed saving." The king nodded. "And now my people need saving. War is close. My advisors want an alliance through marriage. But if I ask Kayla to do this, I lose her. If I don't, I may lose my throne. What if there's another way?" Eric asked. The king raised a brow. "You speak like a man with a plan." "I speak like a man who won't watch her suffer," Eric replied. Days later, Kayla stood before the people in the central hall. Her voice echoed through the city as it was broadcast to every colony. Under her flag, she spoke not as a princess, but as a leader. "I will not marry to silence fear. I will not trade loyalty for comfort. Our allies must stand with us not because of bloodlines, but because of truth. And if that truth is not enough, then let them go." It was bold. It was dangerous. And it worked. Messages poured in from frontier colonies, support, loyalty, strength. The people had seen her courage and believed in her. Not because of her crown, but because she stood for them. The old nobles grumbled, but their power was fading. The future was forming around Kayla now, a new kind of rule. One that did not bow to fear. That night, she found Eric alone in the training yard. He was sharpening his blade. She walked to him without speaking and sat beside him. For a while, they listened to the wind together. "I thought I would lose everything," she said softly. "But you didn't," Eric replied. She turned to him. "I told my father I would never marry for power. But I didn't say I would never marry." Eric looked at her. He said nothing. But his hand found hers. They stayed like that for a long time. The stars above them shimmered with quiet approval. The wind over the capital turned sharp, carrying the scent of metal and thunder. Something unnatural stirred in the skies. The sensors at the outer watchposts picked up the disturbance first. Then the palace received the signal. A fleet had entered orbit, unmarked ships. No banners, no warning. And they didn't respond to. Hails, the king stood before his war council with hard eyes and an iron voice. Kayla stood at his side in full battle robes. Eric stood behind her, armored, weapon strapped to his back. No one had to guess what this fleet wanted. They waited until our council was weak, Kayla said. They waited until they thought. I was alone. But you're not, Eric said. The fleet began moving, not toward the military sectors, not toward the colonies, but straight toward the capital. Straight toward the palace. The king ordered the shields raised. Anti-orbital cannons came online. Fighters scrambled. But Eric knew it wasn't enough. This enemy didn't come to conquer land. They came to destroy a name. To erase Kayla from history. In the lower command bay, Eric coordinated with loyal troops. He had trained them himself over the last few weeks. Soldiers who had seen real battle. Men and women who knew how to hold a line. They followed him without question. Kayla prepared too. She visited the wounded from the last battle. She gave orders to the medical teams. She told the young recruits not to be afraid. She didn't speak like a princess. She spoke like a commander. The attack came as fire. The enemy ships dropped payloads designed to bypass shields. Smoke rose from the outer towers. Shockwaves shook the ground, but the people didn't panic. They rallied. They remembered Kayla's words. Eric led a squad to the western wall. A breach had been made. Enemy troops poured through in dark armor, faces hidden. They didn't speak. They only killed. Eric moved like a storm. Every move was sharp, every strike precise. The soldiers behind him matched his pace. Blasters lit the air. Metal clashed against metal. Blood sprayed against the white stones. Kayla moved through the eastern corridors. She had her blade. She had guards. But she led from the front. Her presence turned fear into courage. When an enemy squad breached the garden gate, she met them. Head on, she fought like Eric had taught her. No hesitation. No mercy. The last enemy fell with her blade buried in his chest. Her guards watched in awe. She wiped the blade clean and ordered them forward. Inside the war chamber, the king coordinated the palace's defenses. But his breathing had grown slow. His body trembled between commands. Eric arrived just in time to see him collapse. Kayla rushed to his side. Eric checked the vitals. The king was alive, but barely. Age and stress had taken their toll. He had held on as long as he could. Kayla, the king whispered. It's your throne now. She gripped his hand tightly. I'm not ready. You are, he said. Because you choose to protect, not rule. The king closed his eyes. He didn't die, but he wouldn't rise again for some time. Kayla stood slowly. She looked at Eric. We hold the palace. No matter what comes. He nodded. Colon outside. The enemy brought in heavier units. War mechs, siege drills. But Eric had studied their tactics. He knew how they moved. He set up ambush. Mines, cloaked drones. The first wave never made it past the gate. The people fought with everything they had. Farmers brought tools. Children carried supplies. The palace was no longer just a royal home. It was a symbol. And the enemy couldn't break it. By nightfall, the skies burned red. The last of the enemy fleet began to pull back. But they left something behind. A final drop pod. A single figure stepped out. A commander in dark robes and golden armor. He walked through the fire as if it didn't touch him. His voice boomed. Across the courtyard, bring me the girl, or I will burn this city to its bones. Kayla walked forward, blade in hand. But Eric blocked her path. No, he said. This one is mine. Eric stepped forward, the wind pulling at his cloak. The enemy commander stood tall across the scorched courtyard, fire reflecting in his golden armor. Behind him, smoke curled from ruined walls. The air was thick with the scent of blood and metal. Kayla tried to follow, but Eric raised a hand. His eyes didn't leave the enemy. "This is between me and him," Eric said. The commander smiled. His voice echoed without aid. "You are the human. The one who stained noble blood to save." "A child." Eric raised his sword. "I'm the one who ended your assassins. And I'm not finished yet." They circled each other slowly. Around them, the palace guards held their breath. Kayla gripped the edge of a broken pillar, her nails white. Her heart beat like a drum. The enemy commander struck first, a blur of gold and steel. Eric blocked, barely. The shock of impact rattled through his arms. This was no ordinary soldier. He was fast, trained, a killer without mercy. But Eric had something more. He had purpose. Every move he made was to protect, not destroy. Every block, every strike, every dodge came from something deeper than training. It came from will. The commander slashed across Eric's chest. Blood spilled. Eric grunted but didn't fall. He stepped in close and slammed the hilt of his blade into the commander's ribs. A crack echoed through the yard. The commander stumbled. His eyes widened. Eric pressed forward, blade spinning, carving lines through the air. They clashed again. Sparks flew. The ground split beneath their feet. Kayla couldn't watch anymore. She moved toward them, but guards held her back gently. "He fights for you," one of them whispered. "Let him finish it." The commander roared and struck low, aiming for Eric's knee. Eric leapt over the blade and landed behind him. With a deep breath, he drove his sword into the back of the enemy's armor. Metal screeched. The commander screamed. He fell to his knees. Eric stood over him. "You could have walked away," he said. "I was promised the throne." The commander growled. "You're leaving with nothing." Eric replied. He raised his blade and ended it cleanly. The courtyard fell silent. Then came the cheers, soldiers, servants, citizens watching from rooftops. They shouted Eric's name. They chanted Kayla's title. Hope returned to the air. Kayla ran to Eric, blood soaked through his armor. His legs barely held him. But when she reached him, he smiled. "You're safe," he said. "You're bleeding," she said, tears brimming. He touched her cheek gently. "It was worth it." The medics rushed in. Kayla wouldn't leave his side. Even as they carried him into the healing chambers, she held his hand. The people followed quietly, whispering prayers. He had become more than a warrior to them. He had become legend. The next day, the king's health worsened. He called for Kayla. His voice was faint, but his eyes held pride. "You defended your home," he said. "You stood with your people. You chose love over fear. The crown is no longer mine." He reached for her hand and placed the royal crest in her palm. "You are queen now." Kayla bowed her head. "Only if my people want me. They already do," he whispered. When Kayla walked onto the palace balcony wearing the royal sigil, thousands gathered below. Her voice was strong as it rang across the city. "I will lead not by blood alone, but by trust. I will rule not by fear, but by honor. And I will protect what we've built together." The people roared their approval. Ships circled above, flashing lights in salute. Across the galaxy, colonies raised the banner of Harnix again. In the healing wing, Eric rested. His wounds were deep, but he was alive. Kayla visited every hour. She sat beside him, reading reports, signing decrees, holding his hand when no one watched. On the third night, Eric opened his eyes fully. "You're queen now," he said with a faint smile. Kayla nodded. "You should have waited for me before charging into death. I figured you'd be too busy making speeches," he replied. She laughed and pressed her forehead to his. "You are not allowed to leave me," she said. "I wasn't planning to," he whispered, and for the first time in days, They both slept without fear. Weeks passed since the final battle, and the capital of Harnix began to heal. Scars on the buildings were repaired. Gardens regrew. People laughed again in the streets. But something deeper had changed. The people no longer saw a princess. They saw a queen who had earned their trust. Kayla ruled from a new throne room one, rebuilt with both old stone and modern steel. The walls held banners of past kings, but now a human flag stood beside them. Not as a conqueror's mark, but as a sign of unity. Eric walked again, though slower than before. The wounds across his chest had faded into thick scars. He refused to cover them. When Kayla asked why, he simply said, "They remind me why I'm still here." Kayla gave him a new title, Guardian of Harnix. It held no crown, no lands, but it gave him the right to stand beside her at all times. Some of the nobles objected, but the people didn't. They cheered louder for Eric than for any noble born. One morning, as the sun rose over the silver towers, Kayla walked into the gardens alone. She wore simple robes, no crown, no jewelry. Eric followed a few steps behind. When she reached the center of the courtyard, she turned to him. "You never asked for reward," she said. "I didn't do it." "For reward," Eric replied. Kayla stepped closer. "Then what did you do it for?" He looked into her eyes. "For you." She reached for his hand and placed something small into it. A ring, not made of gold, but of woven crystal from her home world. It shimmered faintly in the morning light. "I asked the royal council for permission," she said. "They agreed. Not because I'm queen, but because they saw what we fought for. What we built." Eric stared at the ring in his palm. "You don't have to say yes," she said. He didn't say anything. He just took the ring and slid it onto his finger. Then he took her hands in his. "I didn't come here to rule," he said. "But I'll stand beside you for as long as I breathe." Later that day, the people of Harnix gathered once more in the central square. Not for war, not for speeches, but for a union. No royal wedding had ever looked like this. No forced ceremony. No arranged match. Kayla stood before the crowd with Eric beside her. She spoke plainly. "I offer him nothing he hasn't already earned. He saved me not just from death, but from silence. He gave me strength, not by order, but by choice." Eric spoke next. He didn't wear armor, just the robes given to him by the people. His voice was steady. "I didn't know this world. I didn't know these people. But I saw someone worth standing for, and I will stand for her again and again." Their hands met. The sun caught the crystals in their rings. The city roared with cheers. Ships danced in the sky above. Children tossed flowers from balconies. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a moment the galaxy would remember. That night, as the stars blinked awake, Kayla and Eric sat on the highest tower of the palace. The wind was calm, the sky clear. Below them, lights shimmered like rivers of gold. Music drifted from the lower streets. "You know they'll test us again," Eric said. "I hope they do," Kayla replied. "We've already shown what happens when they underestimate us." Eric nodded. "So what now?" Kayla leaned her head against his shoulder. "Now we build something worth protecting. Far beyond their world, messages spread. Other kingdoms heard what had happened, some with respect, some with envy. But none could deny the truth. A human had walked into a broken kingdom. He had not asked for power. He had not begged for honor. He had only acted when someone needed help. And in doing so, he changed the fate of a planet." Kayla looked up at the stars. "Do you miss Earth?" Eric smiled. "Sometimes. But I wouldn't trade this place. Not for anything." She wrapped her arms around him. "And let's make sure it stays ours," she said. And from that moment forward, no enemy ever forgot the name Eric Danner, or the queen who chose him.